Hey everyone, I'm Mike Connors, and this is How It Ticks, a podcast about the systems, stories, and ideas that shape life in Switzerland. My guest today is Elsbeth Stern, a cognitive psychologist and Professor Emeritus of Teaching Learning Research at ETH Zurich. Her work delves deep into how we learn, how intelligence develops, and what really makes for effective education. I have often heard that intelligence or IQ is something that you're born with. But what does the latest research say about how nurture can influence it? And how useful is it to know your own or your child's intelligence level? If you found out that you or your child was particularly above or below average intelligence, should this impact career choices? In this episode, we examine what intelligence truly is, how it's formed, and clarify the discussion around nature versus nurture in human intelligence. We also talk about whether there's really such a thing as maths people versus creative people, if one have an advantage over others in terms of intelligence, and we consider if activities like sports and music can boost intelligence. Elsbeth offers her thoughts on the value of understanding children's intelligence through proper assessments, her view of the current Swiss education system, and her vision for an ideal school of the future. We also discuss which countries are doing education best, the critical skills children need to thrive in an AI-influenced future, and the continuing importance of multilingualism. Now, here's my conversation with Elsbeth Stern. I know you've answered this question many times before, but for those not familiar with your work specifically, how do you personally define intelligence?
Yeah, of course, there are many definitions, but as psychologists, we prefer to understand intelligence as a kind of reasoning ability and cognitive flexibility. So it's really the mental ability. I know there are many intelligences like social and emotional intelligence, but I think this is just a bad brand using. I think we should stay with a cognitive definition of intelligence. And this mainly means the reasoning ability to infer new knowledge from given knowledge by logical reasoning. People who are good in these aspects, they have a lot of advantages. They often are smart, although sometimes even intelligent people can be very stupid, no question in certain points. But really saying it's the ability to deal with abstract material, and cognitive flexibility is the best way to focus on this very important ability where people, whether we like it or not, show big differences.
Is it valuable to know your own intelligence relative to other people, to take an IQ test, do you think?
I don't think that everybody should take an IQ test. I even would warn doing it. I think most of the people have a feeling they should probably know about the normal distribution, about the bell curve, and have a feeling where they can locate themselves. But I think it's not important to know the exact point, but I think you should know whether you are really gifted, that means at the high end, or whether you are more like average, because it helps you to make important decisions. But we can get so much feedback, about our intelligence in everyday context or in academic contexts that I don't think it's necessary for everybody to do it. Some people gain a lot from taking an IQ test. Those who, for some reasons, couldn't show their intelligence at school because probably their family background wasn't appropriate. Teachers didn't recognize that people were intelligent. And some people have the feeling I could do more than I could show at school for whatever reason. And in this case, I really recommend to take an intelligence test because then people really get a better self-concept.
Based on the society that we live in, is it possible to be too intelligent?
I don't think so. I think intelligent people have a lot of advantages. They can make better decisions. They probably know what or can judge dangerous situations. I don't think so. I think it's a big problem if very intelligent people don't get the opportunity to invest their intelligence in useful competencies. If a very intelligent child is prevented from dealing with academic material, then I think this child will become very unhappy. But if intelligent people get the opportunity to invest their intelligence in a way they would like to do, they usually are quite happy. And intelligent people have an advantage. They can decide either investing their intelligence in a very complicated area, mathematics, physics, or scientific career, whatever, then of course they haven't much time for other things. Or they can just decide a career which isn't that demanding and they can nonetheless be very good. The advantage is really that intelligent people can decide having something that doesn't require too much resources for them because they have good resources and therefore they have time and resources for hobbies or whatever. This is the advantage of intelligent people.
Conversely, if you knew or found out that you actually have very low intelligence, you're
Mhm.
stumbling through life,
Yeah.
how well is societies and governments geared to support people like that, and what should you do about it?
Yeah, I think, of course, it's also very important because there are a lot of fields where you really can compensate a lack of intelligence by concentrating on really on investing all your resources in a certain kind of profession or whatever. I think that people who are really scoring at the lower end, they should be encouraged to focus on something that isn't too abstract, but they can improve by practice. And there are a lot of professions or opportunities to earn your money and become a respected member of the society if you do in a do certain things very good. If you don't invest too broad and don't be distracted by too many things, then even people who score on the lower end, they can do some jobs very well. And I think that's an important feedback they should get.
Are there character traits of intelligent people, very highly intelligent people?
No, that's a funny thing that intelligence is almost uncorrelated with all kinds of traits. Of course, we have this big five, psychology traits where probably like introversion and neuroticism and so on. There's one thing, openness to new experience. That is slightly correlated to intelligence. And this makes sense, of course, because if you feel already overtaxed by new situations, you aren't too open. And intelligent people have the feeling they can cope with some challenges and some new information. Therefore, they are a little bit more open. But the other traits are not correlated. So it means there are intelligent people who are extroverted, there are intelligent people who are introverted. Some are a little bit neurotic, others are the opposite. Therefore, intelligence is a quite isolated, is quite independent of other traits.
Mm. I think something my understanding of intelligence is it's very much genetic, and then
Mm.
perhaps your environment is something where you can let your intelligence flourish. Is that fairly accurate? Is
Yeah,
that what's
yeah,
the balance
that's
between genetic and
yeah.
environment?
Yeah, it's important to read. Formally, it was always a question, nature versus nurture. That means the idea that, you have to find out what are the genes and what is the environment. Nowadays, we say it's nature via nurture. That
Mm.
means the DNA we are born with, we didn't choose it, we just got it, has a big impact on the development of intelligence given that we have an environment that provides a good, gives us the opportunity to develop our intelligence. So if two people with different DNA, undergo the same environmental influences, then the intelligence outcomes will be very different because some people have better resources to exploit the environment. But of course, it's not for the individual. We can say whether, if somebody has an IQ of 120, we can't say 100 points come from the gene and the 20 points come from the environment. We only can say they only refer to the variance of groups. So it's very important to see that there is no fixed number, but the better the environment is, the more gets everybody the chance to develop his or her intelligence due to the genetic preconditions we bring.
Has it been looked at intelligence in that sense? If you had twins in an identical situation, would the expectation be that the intelligence is the same, or is it also a little bit like height or body features? There is still this natural variance between them unless they are identical.
Yeah, but there are identical twins are very similar. If they were raised together, they are very similar in intelligence. Of course, intelligence tests have a measurement error, and this means that one twin probably has for some reasons the measurement isn't as exact for one twin than it is for another. Therefore, can be a little deviation. But the final proof for the strong genetic impact was the comparison between identical twins and fraternal twins. That means fraternal twins, their genetic similarity is similar to normal siblings. Also, they share a lot of environmental impact, much more than normal siblings do. But nonetheless, the correlation between fraternal twins and normal siblings is almost similar. And it's much lower than the correlation between identical twins.
So there's a good chance. So there is it can be a big variance in intelligence between siblings.
Yeah, it can be because siblings, on average, only share 50% of their genes. On average. It can be 100, theoretically it could be 100 or 0, but of course it's something in between. And in terms of genetic similarities, fraternal twins are similar to normal siblings. And if the environment would be so important, then fraternal twins should be much more similar than normal siblings because fraternal twins share a lot of common environment. They spent their time together in the womb and they probably had similar birth experience and so on. But nonetheless, these factors seem not to be that important because they are not too different from siblings. But identical twins, they almost are identical in IQ. Of course, there are some deviations, but they are quite small.
What is the correlation, if any, between people who are analytical versus creative, or the classic math versus arts mindset, or the people who like to work on problems versus be more creative? Is there any correlation between that separation and intelligence?
It doesn't. It doesn't make sense to have this division because creativity, of course, is a much more fuzzy concept than intelligence is, because creativity also depends on whether something is accepted by society or not. And it's very often the case that somebody who comes up with a new idea, at first there is a lot of reluctance and it takes some time before this idea is accepted. And this has a lot to do with that people more stick to the familiar things. So people who are creative, they often have a very good knowledge in their field, or they have to have a good knowledge in their field. For instance, a creative cook or a chef, he, of course, or she will mix things together. Usually, we wouldn't probably dare to do. And but it's not that they just by chance mix things together. They really have an idea. So they really have to know their field very well, create people who get a benefit for their creative ideas. They often need very good knowledge in this field. So in really to plan new ideas, not by chance mixing some things. And of course, they have to deal with frustration. They have to persevere. They have to make sure that they will not be disappointed and discouraged if their idea isn't accepted. Immediately they have to come up with the idea again and again and try not to be too frustrated if it takes some time before others recognize their wonderful idea. And also people who are good in art, of course, they invested their intelligence in a different way, but they very often are also very intelligent.
Mm. Does our intelligence, it's for the average person, how does the intelligence track over time? Is it natural that in the beginning, when you're young, you're being trained by your
Mm,
parents, you're being
mm,
exposed to all these new things, you're
mm,
constantly growing, and does that
mm.
plateau as you get older, as you stop experiencing new things?
Yeah, of course. I think the plateau will be reached around adolescence, so late adolescence. The number of school years is a big predictor of intelligence. One could show that in many countries, of course, in the last 50 years, the number of years everybody spends in school has increased very much. So, but my father, for instance, went to school
Mm.
for 7 years. Now people go to school for 12 years almost. And this has really increased the average intelligence value scores, but the differences remained the same. So that means that's the funny thing that, of course, we always could get better, but the differences remain the same. And the stability, the individual stability is approached in adolescence. And at this time, we currently don't know any factors which will further increase intelligence afterwards.
How much do you think is in the classroom versus parents now being more focused on educating their children? Like, how
Yeah.
much do you give to schools in this
Um,
context?
yeah, schools, we wouldn't have intelligence without schooling. So it was really, yes, the simple systems we learned at school, reading, writing, and mathematics, is very important for developing intelligence. No matter how good your genes are, if you wouldn't get the opportunity to go to school and learn about logical reasoning, learn about symbols that are representing information in symbols, you couldn't develop the intelligence to the extent your genes would allow it. So school is very important. It's the biggest booster of intelligence we ever had. Of course, it's also important from early childhood on that children get the opportunity to develop their vocabulary. That means to be exposed to new words, to be exposed to correct grammar, and so on. These are very important factors. But I think most of the families, or if the families can't, then other institutions could really provide this opportunity. Nonetheless, I think, you could train a child, 8 or 9 year old, you could train it a little bit beyond his or her real abilities. But when he or she will be 18 years old, you probably would really recognize the real intelligence.
Mm.
The problem is, of course, that nonetheless, there are parents who have better opportunities. They are quite good in navigating their children through the educational system, even if they don't have the intelligence to do so. This is a big problem we have in all countries, in Western countries currently, that parents are very eager to get every child to a kind of university education, and they invest a lot. And in most cases it works, but this doesn't mean that the child really brings the right intelligence, but it just is adapted to the system, and the system adapts to less intelligent children by lowering the standards or whatever. This is currently our biggest problem, that intelligent children who don't have the right family background, they have less chances to get to the university track.
How important is it for a parent to identify the intelligence of their child when they're at a young age?
Yeah, I think it's not. Yeah, parents should understand that their impact on their child's intelligence isn't as big as they probably think. So, if of course they should do a lot to help the child develop cognitive abilities, talk with him, read with him or her, and if he or she is interested in numbers, they should really do some number games with the child. But parents probably quite quickly understand, the cognitive potential of their children. They probably see that there are differences between the siblings, but they often have difficulties in accepting that not every child has the genetic resources for an academic career. And they probably should accept that there are many other ways for children to really pursue careers which don't require university education. But some parents accept it, others have difficulties, and they invest a lot of money to make sure their children go on this track. I think if parents really want to get clear whether their child has probably different cognitive profile, I would recommend they go to a psychologist and have an intelligence test. And if they see their child has a quite robust intelligence, is average but not top, they should accept it, and they should think about careers that have some go in different directions. If they see their child is very intelligent, they probably should encourage him or her to invest a little bit more time in school in order to get the opportunity for an academic career.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you next. So, if you do find out, even if your child is not really intelligent, but what are some practical things parents can do with young children to really bring the most out of it? You said at a very young age that language and new words is very helpful.
Yeah.
So maybe
It's all.
I gotta ask. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
going to ask you two questions in one because I've been dying to ask. How does multiple languages or or trilingual parents and households help in the development of a kid's intelligence?
I think, of course, it's a bit, growing up with two languages is a big present, because then you learn both of them more or less incidentally. And one should use the opportunity. But the impact on general intelligence of multilingualism isn't that strong. Or if there isn't a correlation, it's probably more a selection effect, because more intelligent parents are more likely to find a partner with another language, but nonetheless have a common language, and therefore can offer their children a bilingual environment. So usually bilingual families score more on the upper half of the intelligence scale. I don't think that it would be a good idea if you don't are bilingual in a family, even if two intelligent people have the same mother tongue. I wouldn't recommend to speak English or to speak another language with the children, even if the parents master it, because it would be very artificial. And there isn't really this big effect. The advantage is really of bilingual environment, that it really happens in a natural setting. And there are a lot of ideas that children already should go to a bilingual kindergarten because it would boost intelligence. That's just not true. So only if you really are in a bilingual environment, for instance, in Switzerland, in some areas, French and German is used in the same city, then it could make sense to bring the child to a French kindergarten, even if the family speaks German, because then the child has a lot of verbal input and in this kindergarten. Then the child would learn French just almost like a mother tongue. But the impact on intelligence, if any, wouldn't be that big. But it would be, of course, a big present to learn a language, a second language, without the effort one usually has to take when one has to learn it just in the way schools teach it.
That's interesting. My wife is Swiss and I'm
Mm,
Australian, and my German is
mm,
not good enough to be speaking it on a podcast
mm,
like this. But
mm.
that makes me think, when we have a child, then based on what you're saying, in the household, it doesn't make sense for me to speak German to our child. I should be speaking English because that's my mother tongue.
Yeah, I would really recommend, strongly recommend, that you speak English with your child and your wife speaks German with your child. Yeah, because then you have a basic understanding of German, I understand. So you wouldn't be isolated
Mm,
if she completely. And then your child really gets the opportunity to learn two languages without big effort. So I really would recommend doing this.
mm. Now, zooming out a bit and focusing a little bit more on Switzerland, how do
Mm.
you assess the current state of the Swiss education system today? Do you feel they're doing a good job?
Yeah, education is complex, and education is based on traditions which you can change very quickly. So it's a very complex thing, and we know, of course, a lot of interacting factors are in educational systems. I think Switzerland has one big advantage, and this is that only 20% are supposed to undergo university education, and the others really get the opportunity for a very good vocational education. So there is really no need, if you see your child wouldn't like this academic branch, there is no need to force your child to do it,
Mm,
because he or she would have a lot of other opportunities to follow a career. And I think this is a big advantage. It's also, they have this tracking system with gymnasium and the regular schools. It's better than in Germany because it starts later. In Germany, it starts already at age 10, which is by far too early, as I think. Nonetheless, we see that social background plays a big role also in Switzerland when it comes to the academic track to the gymnasium. I have data, a lot of other colleagues have data which show that, that there are about 30 to 40% of the children at the gymnasium who are not the top 20% as it is supposed to be. And there are a lot of others, more intelligent students who don't come from an academic background, who go to the vocational education branch, which is fine if it would be their free decision, but it's not fine if it's just taken for granted that the parents' background really is the factor that determines whether the children go to university or not. But currently, all countries have this problem. Yeah, many of us, also we grew up in the so-called golden age of social mobility in Germany and in Switzerland and so on. The percentage of students who were supposed to go to the academic branch increased a lot. And so a lot of children from non-academic families had the opportunity to go to the gymnasium. But now the boat is full, so to say. Switzerland doesn't want more than 20% going to undergoing university education, which makes some sense. In Germany, we have already 50%, which
mm,
is a little bit problem because too many. But anyhow, we can't increase the number. It doesn't make sense to increase the number of students going to the gymnasium any longer. And now it's really that the academic families, really want their children to stay in this track. And therefore, they just fill the places. In former times, intelligent students from non academic background could fill. And this remains a very big problem, and it will increase in the next years.
Do you think that the in the younger years, before you're at the age of where you can decide which direction you go in terms of choices of classes, do you think that the what kids learn in school needs to change to keep up with the world today? And specifically, I remember when I was in school, a big part of your classes is you go to school, you learn about history, you learn in Switzerland, you learn all of the names of all of the different mountains in your region, you
Mm,
take it one or two languages. Do you think, given the access to the internet, globalization, and now even AI, do you think
mm.
that the way kids had to learn before is outdated and needs to change?
Yeah, I think, of course, we always have to think about yeah, the curriculum and what is necessary. In Switzerland, there is still at the gymnasium Latin.
Mhm.
I don't, yeah, also in Germany, we had to learn Latin at the gymnasium. It was more a selection criteria rather than acquiring useful information. I still think mathematics and science and language will remain important. And I think in Switzerland, the idea that everybody should learn at least two languages spoken in Switzerland is also important. It's not so important in monolingual countries, but in order to keep the Swiss culture, I think it makes sense because, yeah, what we learn at school, yeah, or the reasons, the rationale for this is really very broad. There are cultural traditions which may often make sense to
Mm.
keep, also to keep the variety, yeah, in the world. If everybody would speak bad English, I think it would make the world better. Therefore, it's very important to keep the different languages in all
Mm.
countries because they all contribute something to the culture. And it also makes sense to learn history, but of course, it doesn't make sense to learn facts you cannot really combine with understanding and with meaningful knowledge. When I went to school, we had to learn all capitals of European countries. At this time, yeah, traveling wasn't that usual, so we just learned them by heart. It would be much better to learn about countries and then being told, and this is the capital, then you could integrate it much better into your knowledge network. So learning isolated facts without integrating them in a larger network doesn't make sense and shouldn't be done at any in schools. Of course, for learning a foreign language, you have to learn vocabulary, but you shouldn't, of course, learn vocabularies for weeks and nothing else, but you should from the very beginning use them in sentences.
So, if you had a blank slate and to make the perfect education program for an
Mm,
optimal society, I mean, you've mentioned already a couple of
mm,
things in there that are
mm.
important. What would that look like?
Yeah, school is complex and complicated, and we will never have an ideal system because there are many things to consider. The big individual differences in intelligence we have to consider. But I think a society should always think about, yeah, knowledge and competences everybody should acquire in order to really be a member of the society and to really, yeah, for inclusion, for being an inclusive society, we should carefully think what everybody should know. We don't need different school branches because this only has an impact on self-concept, and some people, some students develop very early bad self-concept if we do it too officially. But we could have a much more informal, flexible system at school by really mixing up the different age groups. When I started
Mm.
school about more than 60 years ago, it was not planned, but it was in a small village. My teacher had 8 grades in the same class. Eight, yeah, we are people from eight. How do you say Jahrgang 8? That
Eight
means we had,
grades in the same
yeah,
class.
eight
That's
grades
right.
in the
Hmm.
same class. So the 7 grades had to work silently on reading or writing something, and the teacher taught 1 grade in front of the blackboard. But there were some mixing, so I was quite good in numbers. So I was allowed to come to the blackboard when the fourth grade was learning
Interesting.
something about mathematics. Yeah, it was a big challenge for this teacher, and not every teacher did this very well. Therefore, it's not a model for going on. But really don't sticking to the age, but really see that some children already could do mathematics. 6-year-old children could do mathematics with 10-year-old children, but probably they should do reading with the same with their age group or the other way around. So being more flexible without being too formal. I think this would be very important. And what we know is teachers are very important. And another question would, of course, be, are there countries which are more successful than others? And there's, of course, also we have selection effects, we have different cultural impact. So I wouldn't say we should copy the system of Singapore or Finland or whatever. It doesn't make sense. But what we know is that countries who are in the luxury situation, that they really can choose teachers from a bigger pool of capable teachers, they do better. So we know quite good what makes a good teacher. He or she really needs to know the subject very well. So you can't be a good mathematics teacher without really knowing mathematics far beyond what is on the curriculum. So if you are a mathematics teacher in elementary school, you have also to be good in mathematics in secondary and high school, because you have to get a feeling where students have to approach to. But this is not enough. So teachers also have to understand the difficulties students have with the material. They have to understand what kind of misconceptions are likely to appear, which has been intensively researched in physics, that students have a very different understanding of force or all the other concepts. They must be motivated to see progress in their children. We know what makes a good teacher and what doesn't make a good teacher. But in many countries, being a teacher isn't very prestigious. So that means they don't have really the support they should probably have. Therefore, at least currently in Germany and Switzerland, we are short of teachers. So schools have to take everybody. And in countries where they can select between teachers, where it's really hundreds would like to become teachers, but there's only space for 20, these countries do much better job in international tests, because in these countries one can really look for the best teachers.
Which countries are they?
Yeah, Finland was an example of this, because in Finland, the people weren't very rich in usual, but they also were they had a good life. So it didn't matter so much whether you earn some euros more or less. But being a teacher was really something that got a lot of prestige. And the society and the parents trusted the teachers, that they wanted the best for their children, that they really try to get out the best of the children. So it's really the reputation, the profession of a teacher has in a society. And this is societies where teachers have a high reputation. They do better job, because then the best people want to become teacher.
I mean, it does sound like a simple solution, just to pay double the salary of teachers and then make people want to be teachers. And
no, that's not, of course, the way. On the one hand, you would also have to pay double the salary of the existing teachers. Otherwise, they probably would really become very lazy and become even worse than they are. And it's not just the salary. Also in Finland, the salary isn't that high. It's modest. It's okay, but you can live on it. But we all know that money only is important to a certain degree, and to lead a really satisfactory life, you want to see progress. You want to see that you really change something in society and have a lot of self-control. It also depends a little bit on the prestige of other professions. For instance, in the former GDR, in the communist time, nobody wants it probably back, but in the former GDR, they had very good teachers, particularly in natural science and in mathematics, because there wasn't the profession of being a manager and earning a million. Yeah, they hadn't much choices, but being a doctor or being a teacher, these were traditional professions. And if you were teaching mathematics or physics, yeah, you wouldn't be involved too much in silly political discussions. So very intelligent people in the former GDR became mathematics and physics teachers. And you could see it in students' achievement even after the reunification. I come from Western Germany, but I was professor in Leipzig shortly after the reunification. And I was really impressed by many teachers, how intelligent they were, and also, yeah, what the way they taught mathematics. But of course, this has changed also now because, yeah, people who would have become teacher 40 years ago in the former GDR, they nowadays become manager or whatever because they get much more money. There wasn't money in the former GDR. Therefore, it's nothing you can really steer. That's the important, big problem.
Now, I would regret it deeply if I didn't get to take this opportunity speaking to an intelligence expert to ask you about artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
What is your opinion on the last explosion in the last 2 years of large language models and artificial intelligence?
Yeah, it's of course a very big challenge. We know, of course, tools are as good as you use them. You can misuse them, you can use them appropriately. And currently, yeah, particularly I'm a university teacher, and particularly at the university, we have to change a lot because we know that, yeah, written texts, of course, I can distinguish between a good and a bad text, but not all texts from students are good. So I don't think I can distinguish between a student's text and a ChatGPT text. And this becomes a big problem because we know that writing is a very important tool for cognitive development. In order to become more competent, in order to organize your thinking, you have to write. And if we don't bring students, no matter at what age level, to writing, we will really lose cognitive competences. You can't just delegate a writing to a machine. You can't delegate sports to somebody else and hope you will get powerful and develop muscles. And the same is, of course, for writing. So we have to provide learning spaces where students don't have access to ICT. I think this is very important. We have to put students into a room just with some writing material, but no access to ICT, and they have to write an essay. I think that's very important. On the other hand, of course, we can use ICT very well. Computers can give feedback very precisely and timely. I think we should use the computer for teaching also because we are short of teachers, of good teachers. We have to delegate a lot to ICT, but you have to do it in a way that it's really helpful for students. For instance, if they make a mistake, we shouldn't just let the computer or the program correct the mistake, but say to the students, you made a mistake. And you only can go forward if you first listen to an explanation for why you did this mistake. This kind of feedback isn't too difficult to implement and it should be used. And what I also think is particularly these large language models, they also provide opportunities for learning to ask the right questions. Usually students are used to answer the questions asked by the teachers. Yeah, that's a normal game. But in order to use large language models appropriately, you have to ask the right questions. And you get better answers if you ask your question in a more precise way. And this could also be a learning opportunity. and students should use it as a learning opportunities. Teachers should encourage to do it. So I would say, on the one hand, you should have learning opportunities without any ICT to acquire the classical competences and to make sure you really acquire it and don't let it do by the computer. And on the other hand, you really should learn to use ICT appropriately.
I mean, it seems inevitable that it's just going to be in every corner of everyone's life unless blockers are put in place forcefully.
Mm.
Given that kids as young as 5 years old now are building websites because they have all these tools to be able to do so, but it's really using a tool to do it on their behalf. With all of this influence in technology, are you optimistic about the future of education?
Yeah, I think it's not inevitable that we will lose control or so on. I think we have to be active. We shouldn't wait for a better world, but we should really see there is nothing good or bad in pedagogy. It's always a question, how to use things. And I think it's still under our control to make sure that it's used appropriately. And that, we really don't lose some competences. Of course, we always lost competences. In former times, people were much better in horse riding than we are nowadays because we have cars. And now horse riding is only a hobby. That's fine because we have a full compensation of it. But we will never be able to compensate for riding because the cognitive pros, we developed other kinds of sports. But the competences we acquire by riding, we can't just compensate by ChatGPT. If young children already say, please write me an essay about this, although they aren't able to write, it would be, of course, a very strange development. So we still have to make sure that basic competencies like morosity, getting an idea of mathematical concepts, and really being literate in terms of reading and writing, we can't compensate it. We have to make sure that everybody gets and uses the opportunity to become better.
That was my final question, but you've already answered half of it, which is with AI becoming such a significant force, what are the most critical skills and knowledge that children need to develop independent of the technology? So it sounds like we've got writing, we've got critical thinking and problem solving are some of the biggest ones they still need to learn themselves.
Yeah. Problem solving, really. An indicator of intelligence is mathematical word problems. These are, of course, logical problems. You derive new information from given information, and mathematical word problems are an example where you really learn problem solving, where you really learn to organize knowledge in a way and to organize the goals in a problem. That's very important for
Can you give an
problem
example
solving.
of a mathematical word problem?
Oh, yes. Tom has 5 marbles. Peter has 6 marbles more than Tom. How many do both have altogether?
I see.
This is a very nice verb problem, which highly correlates with intelligence because it requires some inferences. These things are very important for children to develop their problem-solving competencies. And of course, critical thinking also means that you look for different explanations for it. This also intelligence means, of course, to look for the best explanation, but it also could mean to look for different explanations which both could be valid or which exclude each other. This is also very important to be faced with more complex problems, with more, as we call it, ill-defined problems which don't have a single best solution, but where you really have to wait a little bit what's more important in this context or more important in another context. Of course, when it comes to law problems, then you really have to judge different solutions. This is kind of critical thinking, not taking the first solution, but really thinking about alternatives.
Do you have one more time for one more question? I thought of another one, which, to be honest, I should have asked earlier, but I'll move it
Well,
there. And maybe this is not your area of expertise, but have you looked into the correlation between intelligence and autism and autistic children?
not myself, but I know some of this spread. Autism, of course, can go along with normal intelligence. But yeah, currently I'm not happy with this idea of autism spectrum disorder. Autism is really, in the classical sense, is really that you don't have a theory of mind, that you really don't know what's going on in other people's mind, that you don't know what other people know and can't know, and so on. This is really mean this kind of empathy. And autistic people differ a lot in the intelligence they can acquire. But what I don't like is this idea that sometimes a little bit introverted people who are focusing on mathematics or whatever, that they are now classified as autistic. This is what I don't like. Really, people who have this deficit in the theory of mind, they can't reach the highest level of intelligence, because intelligence always means, or acquiring intelligence means to interact with other people, to interact with material. And so they can only do it to a certain extent, and therefore we don't have autistic genius people. Also, some people think it's so. People who really are genius, they are sometimes a little bit strange or whatever, but they are not autistic. They often are not very much interested in interacting with other people, but they can do it. And autistic people really have their deficits in interaction with other people. And some don't have such cognitive severe impairments, but nonetheless, they couldn't lead, they wouldn't be able to, really live independently and develop independent ideas. Therefore, I think autistic people probably can get an average intelligence or a little bit above average intelligence, but they won't get really the highest intelligence. In this case, they are not autistic. It's not my main area. I don't know whether you know Uta Frith, and she is the expert on autism. And she also is very unhappy with this recent development that you have this idea of autistic spectrum disorder and classify very intelligent people who are a little bit strange because they are interested in things like physics and mathematics, to classify them as autistic, because it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help the people who really have this impairment and who really need support. And it builds stereotypes or it supports stereotypes that really are not appropriate. Therefore, I would say, of course, the main cause for autism is this impairment in reading other people's mind. And this also, limits the opportunity to reach a certain intelligence. Also, I know some autistic people who really are good in reading and writing. That's not the problem. They have some special interests, but they are limited to a certain extent. Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm.
Well, Elsbeth, it has been an absolute
Cool.
pleasure having this conversation. Thank you very much.
I'm happy, and I hope you can use most of it. Yeah, okay.
I believe so. All right.
Yeah.
Well, have a great evening. Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening. If you did enjoy the episode and you want to support me, it would mean a lot if you could rate the episode and follow the podcast on your favorite platform. It really helps the show grow and reach more people. I'll see you in the next episode.